On government side, we have DJA. On opposition, Sri KDU B. Before we start the debate, I'd like to remind everyone to either silent or turn off their phones. If you'd like to leave, please make sure it's in between speeches so as to not disturb any of the speakers. On the motion of this House, as a homosexual professional athlete, publicly declare his or her sexuality, let's start the debate with Prime Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, in status quo itself, if I'm a professional athlete, I'm forced to hold back my true sexuality. I'm forced to lie to myself because necessarily my credibility is on the line. The credibility of the nation or club I represent is on the line. We think that this is necessarily unjust because look, if you're a normal individual itself, if you need to progress into accepting minorities such as homosexuals, it's much better done in sporting events itself, on an international level, on a public platform. I'm going to prove that to you in my speech. I have 3 arguments for you today. Number 1, how there's already an existing silver bullet in sporting events in status quo. Number 2, how are these sporting events internationally the most effective avenue to fight for the discourse in need for change? Number 3, how is it the most effective and most beneficial for professional athletes and also other minority athletes in status quo? But before that, let's take a look at a few crucial characterizations in today's debate. Number 1, who are these professional athletes, right? We think that these are athletes that needs to have an established career in the international platform or their own national platform and etc., right? They have a representation, he or she has a representation of a particular body, such as nation, a club, a state, and etc., right? We think it's including these individuals, but not limited to that, right? These individuals also need to be sure of their own sexuality before publicly proclaiming and publicly coming out of the closet. Number 2, what is publicly declaring, right? It can be on social media. It can be in sporting events itself, as long as it's public, as long as you publicly declare to the people, as long as the people are able to get hold of this information, including what I said, not limited to it. First argument, how there's already an existing silver bullet in sporting events itself. First level, let's analyze the nature of sporting events in status quo itself. Minorities are not being accepted now, like homosexuals, like even your own identity itself, even your own religious identity, such as wearing a hijab to sporting events. It is not accepted in status quo. For example, if you're an athlete coming from the Middle East, right, that you believe wearing a hijab represents my own identity. If you want to represent your nation, there's a sacrifice that you need to make. Meaning, you cannot wear a hijab to the sporting event. This is a sacrifice that you need to make. We think it is unjust for you to push a burden upon these athletes to lie to themselves, not allowing them to reveal their own true identity. This is the nature of sporting events in status quo. We think that it's illegitimate and unjust. How are we going to change that? Number 2, let's take a look at the main intended nature of sports. What is sports? You need to recognize that sports should be united. It should not be politicized. Meaning, if you're an African American, if you're a black, no matter you're white or not, no matter if you're a minority coming from a minority group, you should be allowed the platform to play sports. That is the main intended aim for sports itself. We don't think that in status quo, sporting events hold the aim for sports. We think it's contradictory. We want to help change that in today's debate. Number 2, how is sporting events the most effective avenue, right? Because number 1, you need to analyze the psyche of these athletes. You need to understand that these athletes are credible and influential people in society. They hold a lot of water, they hold a lot of credibility in status quo. When you have these athletes, right, when you have people aligned with the principle that they believe in, for example, if I'm individual A, I believe that homosexuals are bad. But I also like for example, athlete A, which I don't think that this athlete A is a homosexual. When athlete A publicly proclaims that he or she is a homosexual, then I'm forced to question my own logical belief. I'm then forced to question my own rationality. Why is this good then? It is good in forcing people to question whether their ideas are bad or not. It is good in forcing people to question when are they opposing or are they oppressing these minorities or not. We give an example when Michael Sam, right, came out as an open homosexual, right? We think that this action of him declaring his sexuality forces people to question their own logic. People that are aligned with him, people that are fans of him are forced to question whether homosexuals should be accepted or not. We think that this is the effect that you're going to get at the end of the day, which can benefit the athletes. I'm going to explain further that to you in my third argument. But before that, let's take a look at the second level, the influence of sporting events, right? Sporting events itself should be an empowerment of agents of rights, because you allow the cross culture, right? When every single individual in status quo are allowed to experience and also understand about the culture of another person. We give an example when there's a banner in the Olympics saying supporting Gaza, right? Support Gaza. The banner itself received a lot of backlash, right? And the backlash is necessarily good because it creates the form of constructive discourse that forces people to question their own logical belief, whether we should oppress minorities or not, whether we should accept that, right? We think that that can only be achieved under sporting events itself, because we think that necessarily sporting events is an event that everybody participate in. It is the perfect platform to break oppressive and conservative ideas, because everyone has the opportunity to experience cross-culture, especially in international sporting events itself. Before I move on to my third argument, go.
If the individual is not comfortable, are you then now going to force this individual to come out and declare their sexuality?
Look, we're only okay if that person is, number one, sure of his sexuality, number two, voluntarily proclaiming on a public platform. We're not going to force them, because then if they are not ready for it, you receive a much larger backlash that is extremely detrimental to the main aim we want to fight today. The stance that we want to fight is we want to also protect minorities, especially in sporting events. Number three, how is it much more effective for these athletes to come out, right? When you have a homosexual, a sexuality and an identity that is already so condemned and discriminated in status quo, having such an influential and credible person coming out on an international public platform also allows the incentive and allows the perfect platform for other minorities to come out and fight for their own identity also. Previously, it is previously people in Saudi Arabia or people generally from the Middle East cannot wear a hijab to international sporting events. Now, when you have a homosexual athlete, professional athlete itself coming out fighting for his or her own identity, you also allow the platform for other minorities to fight for their own identity also. We think that the benefit you get from this is you allow, you can have better agents to deal with day-to-day discrimination, because then you have the constructive sphere of discourse. You also allow a much better platform for athletes and minorities itself to be their true self and not conceal and not being able to recognize their own identity. We have a lot of benefits for you today, Madam Chair. We think we take today's debate. Here, here.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We will open the case for side opposition. Let's call.
Now we see that today's debate is about who benefits the athlete the most. So our stance is simple. We want these individuals to be comfortable to come out and declare their sexuality when and only if they are comfortable, and not going to force these individuals to come out like what side government is trying to portray. Now, a few rebuttals towards their substantives. On number one, how homosexuals are not being accepted. Now we see that because homosexuals are not being accepted, exactly why we need to allow these individuals to come out only when they are comfortable. Because if you don't allow these individuals to come out when they are comfortable, you are now burdening these individuals into doubting themselves and doubting the trust which which they have from their fans, which they have from their teammates, because of the stereotype which homosexuals are viewed as. Now, I'll now further rebut this in my second substantive. Now, on the whole idea on how when these people come out and declare sexuality, and they argued on how what are all the benefits which will come with it. Now we see that the motion already states that obviously you're going to pressure, that you're obviously going to force these individuals to come out, whether they are comfortable or not. And even if you don't force these individuals to come out, we see that because you are indirectly encouraging them to come out, you are actually having the society do your work for you by pressuring them into coming out, no matter if they are comfortable or not. Now, before I move on to my substantive, yes.
Exactly that. So your policy will assuming they are comfortable. But if the harm is that they're not comfortable, we think that's also forever harm, that if they don't come out now, they'll never be able to come out.
So you're now outweighing the individual over the LGBT movement. This side only wants to benefit the LGBT movement and is not thinking about the individual themselves, because you're basically saying that because we have this benefit towards the LGBT movement, therefore it's completely justified for us to say that we are willing to accept the individual not being accepted. Therefore we want these individuals to come out. Now, moving on to my substantives on how, number one, sexuality is not a determining factor, and how, number two, on how you're putting an unfair pressure on the athlete. Now, on how sexuality is not a determining factor. The stereotype that homosexuals are weak is especially damaging in sports, because these homosexuals are seen as physically weak and not capable to handle the physically demanding activities such as within sports. Because within sports, it is especially important for people to trust and know that a teammate is capable. Homosexuals are capable, but because of this stereotype towards homosexuals, these individuals will now be seen as incapable and will now lose the trust of their fans and their teammates. Now, and also the fans, because within the sport, it is extremely important for the fans to support these sportsmen, because to progress within the sports scene, you need the support of your fans to move up. Because when I am an individual which is not comfortable coming out, but now you're pressuring me into coming out and state my sexuality, I'm not going to have to deal with the doubt. I'm going to have to now deal with the burden of worrying about of fans losing trust in me, of my very own teammates not trusting me within the scene at all. Therefore, I'm not even going to be comfortable playing the sport in the first place. Now you are handicapping me simply because I'm an individual which is not like everyone else. Now, moving on. Now, before I move on, yes.
As a professional athlete, when you've already proven yourself to be professional, that's exactly why people don't no longer push your credibility. It's a high time you prove your credibility doing so.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
If you as a professional athlete have already proven your credibility beforehand, and now you come out, don't think you dare push your credibility, it's as effective.
Now we see that though these athletes are going to come out and going to lose a little bit of credibility, we see that the athlete is at least comfortable for this mindset to be installed on people, because he is comfortable to now say that I am completely fine with people knowing my sexuality. Now I'm not worried about people losing trust in me, because I trust those people, though other people are going to think otherwise. Now, moving on to how you're putting an unfair pressure on these athletes. Now, when you force these individuals to come and declare their sexuality, you make the person now doubt him or herself, because now you have to then now deal with the doubt of losing the trust of their teammates and losing the trust of their fans. Because when an athlete is constantly worrying about that, they will not be able to do well as well within the sport. Because so now you're basically handicapping these individuals simply because they are not as everyone else within society, and simply because these individuals have to come out and benefit the LGBT movement and not benefiting themselves in the long run. Now, even if you don't force these individuals to declare their sexuality, we see that the government is now encouraging the people around them to pressure these individuals into declaring their sexuality. Now, before I move on, yes.
Look, it is only on oppressive and discriminatory under your side because you don't have a clincher. When you have a credible professional athlete coming out voluntarily, it's a perfect platform for every single minority to fight for their identity. What's the harm in that?
Exactly what we are trying to fight for today. We want to fight for individuals to be able to choose when they want to come out and declare their sexuality, because now you're assuming that all individuals want to come out simply because they can help the LGBT movement, simply because now you are now going to put the pressure onto them to come out and declare their sexuality, whether they are comfortable or not. And even if you are not, like I said, even if you are not directly pressuring these individuals into coming out, the government is basically now telling the people around them to pressure them into telling the sexuality whether they are comfortable or not, because because of this, all the harms will still exist even if you don't directly force them into coming out themselves. Now, because when I am a gay and trying to succeed, but have to worry about people doubting me, have to worry about people trusting me, have to worry about my own teammates not being able to trust me within that sport, why do we have to now put that unfair burden onto them and have them live in fear? Because as opposed to having a side which puts such an unfair burden to these individuals to the point where they can't do their best even within the sport, as opposed to a scenario like that, why not go with the side which is fighting for athletes to come and declare their sexuality only when they are comfortable and only when they want to, because we see that if these individuals don't come out and declare the sexuality when they want to, these individuals are not going to do well at the end of the day because of the doubt which they will have within themselves. Now, what has side opposition brought today? Side opposition has brought to you, number one, how sexuality is not a determining factor, and how, number two, putting an unfair burden on the athlete. Now, with that, I'm proud to oppose.
If I was a homosexual individual in this debate, and I underside opposition's paradigm, they never allow me an accessible route to be able to voluntarily come out under this circumstance. We think that's extremely harmful. What am I going to give to you in today's debate? I'm going to tell you how you exacerbate the harm under your paradigm and how this is voluntary. It's voluntary, but even if it isn't, we think a benefit still exists under our side. Before that, several levels of rebuttals, right? First, they wanted to tell us that that individuals would be seen as weak, that because that homosexuals are generally seen as weak in this instance, right? First of all, we don't think homosexuality in any way should be defined by that way as the state, right? Especially if the state tells them you shouldn't come out because you homosexuals are seen as weak in this instance. This is the state perpetuating the ideology within homosexuals in themselves, right? They're telling them the stereotypes, all right, you shouldn't come out because of this, right? First, we don't think that homosexuality in any way is contingent upon your physical status in this instance, right? We think that's extremely harmful, right? But they also said they will lead to the fans unliking them in this instance, right? No, we don't think so, right? But why? On the second level, we think the society have different mindsets in this instance, right? If true, fine, even in your worst case scenario, if they lose a set of fans in this instance, right? We think another set of fans who are part of these individuals for coming out for themselves will accept them in this instance, right? We think society does have a large mindset that we need to cater to in this instance. We think we do have fans in this instance. But even if you still want to argue that they will lose a substantial amount under their paradigm, we think it's still beneficial. Why so? We think you still change the mindset within individuals in themselves, right? When you have a homosexual figure which has so much credibility, which has so many achievements because he's strong, because he trains over and over again to achieve the status that he has right now. When he comes out there and says he's homosexual, that's when you break the perception, Madam Chair. That's when you show that the homosexuals can in fact be as strong as heterosexual individuals or the best sports player in this instance, right? We think that's when you break the narrative. But even if you don't break the narrative, we think in this instance you still force individuals to counter with the rational calculus, right? Something that Ryan brought to you his speech, which was uncontested under their side, right? Where he told you that he forced individuals who are conservative in this instance because they liken themselves with these idols to be able to decide, or at least at the very least think back on whether or not these homosexuals are all that different in this instance, right? They also had this idea. They also had this idea under their paradigm, right, Mansha? Where say that there's not a voluntary action that we shouldn't force, right? First of all, we aren't forcing individuals under our paradigm, right? We told you that as a homosexual individual, we want individuals to come out, homosexual athletes to come out to begin with, right? There's a clear misrep from their side. That's never something we sit in this instance, right? But what's the benefit? Why do we want them to voluntarily come out under their side? We're going to tell you what's the benefit of them voluntarily coming out, right? I think that's when they gain political traction at the most benefit as they possibly can, right? Because they're an athlete in this instance that says, look, I am a homosexual individual. I am confident about this. I want to come out and say this. This is voluntary, right? They're voluntary, right? We think in this instance, that's when you allow for individuals, for them to be sure of the fact that they are doing this in this instance. That's when you allow for other bodies to not contest them in this instance, right? Because they are sure that this individual is homosexual in this instance. We don't allow for much contention in this idea, right? But then they had this pretty weird idea, right, on how this is not benefiting the LGBT community in this instance, right? We don't think that's necessarily true at all, right? Because what does the LGBT community mainly want, right? They want acceptance in this instance. They want individuals to come out in themselves and be comfortable with themselves in this instance, right? Really on the outside, when we allow you to voluntarily come out in this instance, right? When we allow for the LGBT community to not just breach normal areas, like not just breach things like movies or movie areas or music areas, but also the sports industry themselves, because when you benefit the LGBT community even more, because if you want to argue the whole idea of homosexuality being weak, right, we think this is when we even break the mindset even more, right? So that homosexuals can be anyone in this instance. Homosexuals don't have to necessarily be reserved towards rappers or actors in this instance, but they're also everyday sports people. We think it's extremely beneficial. Before I move on, sure.
Man, the motion already states that you would, right, as the government would make this athletes publicly declare their sexuality, right? So your whole idea of letting them voluntarily come out contradicts the whole motion in the first place.
Look, I don't know what motion you were reading, but it said that this house, as a homosexual individual, as a homosexual athlete, would come out in sporting. It will come out in this house, right? We think that is this. We don't know what motion they were seeing in this instance, right? Let's look at my extension for you today's debate. How you exacerbate the harm under your side, right? Fine. If they want to force us to recognize the burden that is not voluntary in this instance, fine. We think there's still a benefit, right? Why so? We think when you have no definitive moment for a person to come out in this instance, right? That's something that both sides have to recognize. There's no definitive moment when an individual can decide, when a homosexual athlete can decide that it's time for them to come out in this instance, right? When the state does encourage them to do this in this instance, right? That's when you make it accessible for these individuals to opt into this policy to begin with, right? That's when you allow for an avenue for them to do so to begin with, right? We think it's less likely for them to not want to come out in this instance because the state in themselves, already saying under your side, if you want forces to encourage force homosexuals, we think we're benefiting them in this instance because we're allowing for an accessible platform to occur in this instance, right? But moreover, let's analyze the mindset of these individuals in the homosexual community that don't think it's possible for them to opt out in this instance, right? If they don't think it's possible for them to opt out in this instance, they're never going to under your side. We'll perpetuate this idea. It's impossible for them to be able to opt out in this instance, right? Because of all the things that you say in your speech, right? Because the sporting arena recognizes homosexuals as weak and etc., right? We think in this instance it's extremely beneficial that the state puts a pressure on them in this instance, telling them that you should opt into this to begin with, right? We think that's a definitive benefit. But more than that, right? I already told you in his speech, right? How sporting events in themselves are discriminatory towards minorities to begin with, right? They don't necessarily accept or recognize minorities in this instance, right? We think it's extremely beneficial then for a homosexual man to come out in this instance, right? Even if the state is forcing him in this instance to come out, the very act of coming out to begin with is still a benefit because it recognizes that he wants to be able to proclaim himself in this instance. We think we create a benefit for minorities to begin with. Sure, before 6.
Well, the LGBT movement is fighting for people. So why are you not prioritizing the movement over the people not they're fighting for?
How are we prioritizing the movement over the people? The homosexual himself, what homosexual doesn't want to come out? What homosexual doesn't want to be comfortable in his own skin in this instance, right? We think we are prioritizing both, right? We think by the individual in himself coming out as a homosexual, we think we're benefiting the movement as well. I really don't understand this whole not benefiting the LGBT point as a whole, right? But we think we're under our side, right? How do you exacerbate the harm under your paradigm? We don't think you ever allow for an avenue to exist in this instance. You never allow for homosexuals to feel the comfortability of wanting to come out in this instance, especially when the state says, look, you should come out, regardless of whether it's voluntary or not. We think that's when you plant the mindset within individuals that it's okay for them to come out. That the state, at least even if the sporting arena doesn't recognize them, at least the state recognizes them as being a legitimate athlete who's homosexual to begin with, right? We think in this instance that's an undeniable benefit. Side opposition has never recognized any of the points that we've given to you today's debate. We think that if you want to benefit homosexuals in themselves, right? If you want to benefit a homosexual athlete who is put into this place of apparently discrimination and is being perpetuated as someone who is weak, we think under our side, we are the ones who give the full benefit towards these homosexuals. We are the ones who allow them to be comfortable under their own skin.
Madam Chair, we can see even in the starting of the debate, side government has already misread the motion for a few reasons that St. John brought up, which was never rebutted on. First of all, the whole idea, within in status quo already, they have a misread of the problem. In status quo, you have people like Sam Smith already exposing their homosexual identity. However, we don't think that today's problem is about allowing more people to voluntarily come out, but it's about the people who actually don't want to come out, even after seeing success of other individuals who have succeeded in the past, but don't want to come out, but you still force them to come out of their homosexuality. This is actually the debate that should have been debated from the onset. This side doesn't want to acknowledge that. But let me just tackle on the benefits that side government brought up to us today's debate. Side government brought up to us things like discourse and all these kind of benefits. However, we think that these benefits are not mutually exclusive. Because in society, really Sam Smith was really a trigger that made people started to think and all these kind of things. Today's debate isn't about people who don't want to voluntarily come out. Isn't a debate about people who want to come out but can't. But it's a debate about people who don't want to voluntarily come out, but you then still force them to come out as a whole. This is what the debate should have been from the onset. This is something that this side doesn't understand. But before that, clarification.
This house would, as a professional athlete, publicly declare his or her sexuality. How is that forcing these individuals to declare their sexuality? Clarify.
Madam Chair, we think that if these athletes really want to express and even seeing success in other individuals, then they obviously would in the first place already express their homosexuality. But that means that they're uncomfortable to still express their homosexuality, even seeing success in other people who did do it. This is really clear. This is a clear example on how individuals should really want to express their homosexuality, but really can't have the chance, but just are misread by this side government. I'll talk to you about one harm, which is you only contradict the whole purpose of an LGBT movement as a whole. Because they may keep on telling you that it's this house would as a professional international athlete. But I really proven to you that if these athletes really want to, we think that they can. Because we think that they really existing in an avenue that really is there really exists acceptance. So the Sam Smith, which was accepted by the community after that, we don't think that that's the harm. But we think that today's harm is that you only publicly force people to publicly declare, and we think that this leads to one harm. First level analysis. We think that you only create a trickle-down effect, which is you force these individuals who don't want to, and then you take away their primary choice, because that then contradicts the LGBT movement, which specifically says you prioritize the right of that certain individual. And in that certain instance, we don't think that you prioritize the right, because if you don't prioritize the right of choice in that certain instance, because these individuals don't want to actually come into this, no thank you, these individuals don't want to show their express their homosexuality for some reason that we don't know. But if they really don't want to, then why shouldn't they not express their homosexuality? If they really don't want to, but even in an environment that really creates acceptance is really happening, then why don't they just express homosexuality? Because they just don't want to. These are the ideologies that this side wanted to propose in the starting of the debate, because never taken down by side government. Before that, last clarification.
Why should the minute problem of some individuals don't want to publicly declare their sexuality jeopardize others who want to publicly declare?
Okay, Mr. Speaker, this leads, okay, I'm just going to respond to you immediately. We understand all those benefits exist. We think that these benefits must not exist with the risk of taking away with the whole principle that you've been insisting in the first place for a few reasons. We understand that this may benefit people, you may create conception, you may create all these benefits, but in society, you have these benefits existing. Such as I already talked to you about Sam Smith. You have these benefits already existing, but we think that today's debate, you need to tackle on the harm that you propose now, which I'm going to talk about. which is we can't risk the principle, which is the first principle of the LGBT movement is to uphold rights of families. And we think that's existing. But when you take away their right of choice, when you take away their right to decide whether or not they want to, this is harmful. But even if we don't force them, we still think that this really creates a trickle-down effect that makes them subsequently indirectly want to go for a few reasons. Because now when you see so much people going in, even those people who themselves don't want to go will be incentivized to go because they see everyone else doing it. These are the exact ideologies that these people will contain in the end of the day if they do propose this motion. These are the harms that they failed to neglect when St. John came out with his speech. These are the harms that needed to be tackled, never was tackled in the end of the day. But let me just continue on with the whole idea on how it contradicts the LGBT movement. We think this only creates a further effect, which is you only cause a major harm and you compromise things in society. Because now people will have to think. Even the LGBT movement itself is forcing the people that they solely wanted to protect into making decisions that they don't want to, or maybe even if they don't force, they manipulate these individuals to do something that they want to. These are the instances where the LGBT movement isn't fighting for these people, but they're fighting for themselves. They think that they themselves know what's best for people. These are the exact harms that exist within their side. This also creates another harm, which is to further devalue the rights of these homosexuals as a whole. Because now these homosexuals will start to think, am I actually supported by the LGBT movement? Because now the LGBT movement is telling me that you should publicly declare your homosexuality even if you don't want to. These are the ideologies that these homosexuals will have in the end of the day if the LGBT movement does actually propose to this motion. These are the exact harms, and then these people who feel that they lost even their soul trust, the soul identity that they trust. This only creates a much bigger harm because you now have more people in society, more homosexuals in society, which think that they're being left around, which only decreases their confidence, only discourages more people to express themselves. This is a trickle-down effect that you create on your side. Let me just move on to the rebuttals that could possibly exist even if society isn't mitigated. All right, we think that the LGBT movement they have campaigns and they have passed homosexual laws in Uganda and all these kind of things. These are instances where you can see success in the homosexual arena and all these kind of things. We think that there's no necessity completely for today's motion to pass. Because they've never proven those. Okay, fine, which is the benefits are okay. But then we think that those benefits really are not mutually exclusive. They really coexist in status quo. But they fail to prove what's the additional benefit other than you having more discourse that really exists in status quo. We fail to understand what's the additional benefit you can get from their side. In the end of the day, let's compare both sides. You have a side which upholds choice and if you don't want to, don't go. But you have a side that forces you to do anything that you don't want to. But because I am the LGBT movement and I say that I have a choice to dictate your right, you are very proud to oppose.
Thank you. To end the constructive case of that government, let's call Godwin.
Let's analyze, right? To what extent do they want to talk about being uncomfortable within society? So sure, within that proposal, they said individuals will willingly feel uncomfortable, but let's analyze to what reasons they are actually uncomfortable. Firstly, it's very likelihood which they're scared to be discriminated, but secondly, there is idea of which will I generally be disenfranchised? Will I generally be segregated from my community? I am scared to come out because of how people will judge me. That's exactly the reason why they'll be uncomfortable. I'm going to prove to you on several reasons why, even if in the best case scenario which individuals are being uncomfortable, how our case is still better. Two issues for you today. Firstly, let's analyze from the get-go of today's debate. So homosexuals declare their sexuality within status quo. But second issue, let's also compare both paradigms in terms of having their best case scenario versus our best case scenario and the harms that exist on both paradigms. So firstly, right, should homosexuals do so? We think yes, because of four reasons. Firstly, let's analyze the idea of them being uncomfortable and let's directly clash with them, right? Firstly, why especially now they should do so in terms of even if they're still uncomfortable. This directly touches the idea on how LGBTs in terms of being politically inclined to doing so, but will generally not give you that form of support. Firstly, we think that when the LGBT, even if the LGBT movement has some political means, we think that form of guarantee of which they tell you that I will support you if you choose to come out, there is already that direct and inherent benefit that individuals get. We don't think to an extent how individuals or the LGBT movement could generally tell you that we will not support you, we just want you to come out because we think you should do so. We think there's a direct support from the LGBT movement, which is actually that social structure and that moral support which they can give to you as community as a whole. Has even in cases of which individuals before this have felt the same way you do, we think it's a special community that these individuals need the most. But secondly, right, let's look at the idea of which, especially why they should do so. Because within that proposal, when they talk about being uncomfortable within status quo, we think the idea of which that's especially why you should do so. When the question, we live in society where people still question whether or not these people still deserve rights, it's exactly when this crucial time sensitivity in terms of declaring yourself, that's exactly when it's very crucial, and that's especially when you can be weighed the most. We think it's very important for you to do it now at this point of time, even if it's still being questionable. We think it's most effective when it is now. But thirdly, right, the idea of them still, let's tackle the idea of even if they're still uncomfortable, within practice like that will always continue. Meaning from my POI from the get-go, when I told you already, these are factors that will always exist within status quo. You will always want to question, will I be segregated? We think it's now or never. Meaning within your policy, you always say that these factors will always exist. You prohibit them from coming out. We don't think they will ever come out with your proposal. It will never become comfortable because that idea and questioning whether or not I will always be discriminated is always the form of question. But secondly, right, let's also analyze the idea of which even if they say if we want to force these individuals, we think that even if states tell you that we want to force you, there's still a concrete benefit. When states are saying, I will willingly support you if you choose to come out, I will willingly I will willingly as a state, the one that's governing your country, tell you to come out, we think there's a direct form of structure, or generally there is a direct form of need within how governments want to propose this to you. We think it's really very important. But thirdly, right, we think it's even better, even when these individuals, even at their worst case scenario, these individuals still very comfortable. These are individuals that need this form of push to the fullest extent. These are individuals when they question their sexuality and tell themselves that no, I need to lie because I'm not being accepted in this community. These are especially some individuals which need this form of push for them to be accepted within society. Second reason, right, was specifically professional athletes. It came out within all consecutive speakers in terms of how much water and credibility they hold. Because sure, one of their biggest arguments, and here's the clash of which we will clash in their biggest argument, in terms of when questioning their trust, or in terms of their teammates questioning how well they can generally promote, or how well they can actually carry out their sporting event as a whole. We think this especially when our policy is the most effective. These are individuals that within the years of doing so have already told you, yes, even when I won the Best Malaysia Award, or even when I won the Olympics, I was homosexual at that moment. We think that's in terms of being one of the most effective ways because they've already proven to you that being homosexual does not determine how I cannot do sports. There is no direct link in terms of whether me being homosexual now downgrades me as a person. We don't think the harm is then affected within that proposal. But thirdly, right, in terms of how there's a high chance of them generally playing better, because it talked about how in terms like this where they will not trust themselves, now they will play better. We think there's a high chance of them playing better. Now they have no reason to hide. They can be themselves. There's a high chance of them being more comfortable when they say, I no longer have to lie because I realize that coming out will help me play sports better. It is who I am. I will play sports better when I'm being myself. That reason, right? In terms of how sporting platforms are very valuable in terms of international communities, came off in both Atia and Ryan, never responded by them. But let's also bring this back, right? It's the best way for you to redirect the miscommunications or misconceptions within society. Meaning, if I'm extremely conservative and even if I don't have that first-hand experience with a homosexual because I refuse to do so, and on TV I see him say I'm publicly declaring I'm gay, and I see that from a corporation and workmates with individuals that are heterosexual or individuals who really tell you I would still want to cooperate with you because I realize that there's no harm in you being homosexual. I think the realization which I have in my mind saying that look, there is a possibility of them generally being a good member of society within a generally that personal experience or how you realize it is very important and can only be done so within an international platform. But secondly, right, let's also analyze the worst case scenario that even with teammates that generally don't want to accept you, two scenarios. Teammates that want to accept you and will generally cooperate with you, we think that's the most effective ways in terms of how you have to show society that this is one of the best ways to do so. Teammates will still cooperate with you even if you come out. But secondly, in case of which teammates will not cooperate with you, will not cooperate with you, that's when you also force individuals to tell you the reasons why I will not cooperate with you. That's when you can highlight flaws or in terms of why individuals who choose want to be discriminatory. We think this is the only way for you to do so. You force individuals to tell you why I would not want to be friends with you, why I don't want to cooperate with you, then you can regulate the problem within status quo. So during my first issue is that we think this, but before any POIs. No, but we think, going to my first issue, is that we think in terms of how we want professional athletes to come out, it's still in the best case scenario. Second issue, let's analyze the benefits in terms of both houses, and let's compare paradigms in terms of the harms and benefits that this student status quo. Because their best case proposal is, well, we would want to wait for individuals to come out as a whole. We still think it's very detrimental to those that individual. We think that even in the worst case scenario, which individuals are uncomfortable in doing so, these are individuals that need that form of push. Without this form of push, they will always deny their identity. They will always tell individuals and say, no, I'm not gay, please don't tell me I am gay, because they're always going to be scared. How do you then tackle the idea of being afraid, or tackle the idea of discrimination? If I'm a person at home, and if I'm a homosexual in my house, and I'm very scared to come out, and I see a person coming out facing the exact same reasons why I wouldn't come out as a person, within the idea of me relating to him and relating to how he faced that problems and how he generally override that problem as a whole, we think it's very beneficial in terms of individuals that we generally choose not to come out within society. Me looking at a person, one of my idols as a person as a whole, and seeing individuals accept him in a community, especially when I realize there's a coherent benefit or there's a possibility of me wanting to even consider coming out, we think that considering to even come out is actually very, very beneficial within society. Because the problem within that proposal is they never consider. Individuals on the ground are very scared to come out. They don't even consider coming out. We think the harm within that policy is even worse.
Thank you. Now I call on the opposition to end the construction part.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now let's look at this. Let's look at the proposal that came from side government. Right? They came up and talked to us about the whole assumption that now people are going to be more accepting of gays. Now people are going to question their own ideas. People are going to question what they believe in. Right? We think the side government is very naive to think that suddenly now everybody's going to go against everybody's going to question their own beliefs. Everybody's going to question what their religion believes in. Everybody's going to question everybody's going to question themselves. Right? We believe that it is an assumption coming from side government, right? Because suddenly now they come up with an idea, with the idea that now they are able to inspire other people who face the same situation, and inspire other people to come out, right? But let me tell you what is the problem with that, right? When they come up with an assumption like that, we think that they should be able to give the choice to people, right? Because why do we say that their case is not giving people a choice? Because firstly, the motion already states that you pressure these people, or you make these people publicly declare their sexuality, right? First response to that, we already told you that we don't want sexuality to be a determining factor, right? We already told you that sexuality shouldn't be something that's contingent upon something as valuable as sports, right? We don't think sexuality should be a determining factor of how well you play, of how well you do things, right? But because, let me tell you why people are even scared to come out. People are even scared to come out into this society, right? Because of the stereotype that exists, because of the stigma that people have against homosexuals, right? Because of the how people view homosexuals, right? Because of that, people are very scared. Normally people are scared to come out. So now, when you pressure them, or when you make them come out, we see that you're actually pressuring them to come out without even considering if they are able to handle the consequences that come with coming out as a homosexual person. We think that by forcing them, you're not able to let them adapt to you're not letting them adapt to the consequences that come with coming out as a homosexual. Have a seat, please. Now let's look at the main issues of today's debate. Right? When they talked about how the minorities are not being accepted nowadays, and how versus why there's a necessity for people to come out. Right? Now let's look at their case. Right? They came and told us that people who actually necessarily have that credibility to come out. Now when other people see famous sports players coming out and telling the people homosexual, they are able to diminish the whole stereotype of homosexuality. So let's look at the problem with that. We already have celebrities that exist that which already tell people that, look, even if I'm homosexual, I'm still able to be successful or whatnot, right? But we see that does not apply in this situation, because we think that look, just because you are homosexual does not mean that you have to come out now. It does not mean that you actually have to tell the whole world that you're homosexual. Now, the main idea that side opposition is trying to propagate, we don't want people to buy into the whole stereotype. We don't want people to think that sexuality is something that should determine a person. They should tell society that, look, just because I'm a homosexual, I'm not able to do this, I'm not able to do that. We don't want that. This is why we think that there is no necessity for people to declare their sexuality when it comes to these instances, right? We don't think that there's a necessity for them to tell people, look, I am gay or straight when it comes to their career. So what are they trying? What is the whole point of their argument? Even if they want to argue that, if they say that they're able to mitigate the whole stereotype, we already told you that look, that does not happen in these instances, because we still have people who will not suddenly buy into the assumption of breaking their ideas or breaking their what they believe in. Before I move on, yes.
Coming from your second speaker, when you already concede that there's a benefit of Sam Smith coming out in the music industry, why are you then opposing athletes to come out in the sporting industry also?
Sir, look, we already told you, right? Sam Smith came out when he came out voluntarily, like he came out as before we even became famous, right? So this does not affect him, because the followers that he gained are already people who has already accepted him, right? But now when you are making people who have already created a name for themselves, right? When people who already hold so much credibility, when now you force them to publicly declare themselves, we tell you that, look, there are harms that come with it, right? Firstly, you harm their sports or whoever they represent, right? You harm them, because now they have to live with losing supporters, because supporters now lose, because people don't necessarily support people. There are people, homophobic people that don't support the LGBT movement, right? So now when you come up with assumptions that it is easily replaceable, it is easily people will gain new followers, right? We think the assumption that these professional athletes should not have to go through, right? This is the kind of decisions that they should not be forced to make. Have a seat, ma'am. Now let's look at the second issue in today's debate, right? On whether there is a necessity, whether there's a necessity of them coming out, of them being comfortable or coming out, right? Side opposition thinks that it is now or never. If people don't come out now, they will never come out in the future, right? We tell you that as society progresses, right, there are people who get more accepting, right? We think that when it comes to coming out as a homosexual, it should come with the progression of society. It should not be whether now, it should not be a factor of now or never, right? Because we think that when people feel comfortable, when people know that they are okay with the consequences that come with coming out as homosexual, when they really come to terms with the consequences that come with it, we think that is completely fine for you to come out, right? But the thing that we're fighting for now is we don't want people to come out and then realize the consequences that come out, and then realize that their whole career is now affected by it. So now what have side opposition brought to you in today's debate, right? We really talked to you about how sexuality should not be a determining factor, especially when it comes to something as valuable as sports. Secondly, we've also talked to you about how you're putting an unfair burden now on these athletes, because you're telling the athletes that now you have to now it is vital for you to come out, right? So with that argument, we think the side opposition already takes this debate. Thank you.
In the end of the debate, Madam Chair, we think that both sides have really elaborated on how the benefits will exist. We think that today's debate has become which on should we fasten that or should we allow them to progress slowly and socially as it normally has. We think that on our side we really taken down all the benefits, even if they really don't exist, even if they don't coexist in status quo. Okay, let me just further on what actually happened to today's debate. We think that today's debate only came down to one issue, which is is it them forcing or is it they supporting these individuals? We think we are forcing these individuals for a few reasons. Because you think that if you want to support, we didn't really status quo, such as Sam Smith. He was really supported. We think if other people who really sees the support still is studying to make the decision. These are instances where these people are already unsure of themselves, but they still force themselves to go into a more complicated measure when you actually force them to make this decision. This was the society material that came out from St. John's speech, which was never tackled until now by side government. All right, government basically just came out and kept on harping on this whole idea, saying that, oh, you support and you create discourse, between individuals. We think that really exists in status quo for a few reasons, but even if it doesn't, these are the rebuttals to it, okay? First of all, we think that discourse can happen, but we think that you can't force someone to create this, you can't force someone just to create discourse, because we think that discourse can only be created socially by itself, and this was the rebuttal that came out in Sam's speech. She really explained to you on how discourse can only happen socially and on itself, and you can't force an individual into creating discourse, as you think it contradicts the whole purpose of the LGBT movement, as I said in my speech, which is the whole idea. You only do which is three things. Okay, first of all, you only make people even more confused of their current situation when you force them to do something that they're even unsure of making, even with acceptance already happening in society. And second of all, second thing is that you only can't make the LGBT movement even more scarred, because you now picture LGBT movement as an image of individuals forcing these people into making these decisions that isn't even experienced by these people themselves. These people don't want to make this choice for a reason, and we think that we should still appreciate their choice in the end of the day. And what's the third thing? We think that these individuals, no matter what kind of long-term substantial benefit this side can propose, we think it comes back to one thing: feminists. We think it comes back. Homosexuals. We think that in the end it still comes back to homosexuals, right? It's the homosexuals' right. We think that the major stakeholder in the end of the day is still the homosexuals. And I think that and if you don't qualify and if you don't care about the homosexuals' right to make their own choice, we don't see on how that actually benefits homosexuals in the long run whatsoever. But let's just compare both sides. In the end of the debate, you have a side government. They can't say things like, oh, these benefits, this cost will all exist. Fine, we're fine with that. But why fasten the process and create an additional harm which compromises these individuals in the end of the day? You only make themselves more unsure of their current situation, which is a very severe harm, because you then contradict the whole purpose of is homosexuality a choice or which is that you now create a big confusion between these individuals. Is it that harmful to become homosexual because of all the mess you put these individuals in? But we think they were okay, because they never proved to us the time sensitivity. And okay, and even if there's a time sensitivity, we think that on our side, there's still social progression, and if social progression has solved the issues currently now, and that nature check and balance has existed. And for others, and also we argue saying that, okay, even if benefits don't exist status quo, we also argue even if those benefits don't exist, the rebuttals towards on how benefits can also exist even if status quo doesn't have them. And for all those reasons, we think that there's no point in making something longer and making something more compromised instead of just allowing it to move smoothly and in the day let it solve itself. And for those reasons, side opposition takes today's debate.
Let's end the debate with government.
We think it's extremely ironic how we have a member of the adjudication court judging us in today's debate, and side opposition got the debate wrong. But never mind, we'll still tell you how we won the three issues in today's debate. What are those three clashes? We see first, is it voluntary or not? Don't know why that became an issue, but yeah, is it voluntary or not for you to come out as a homosexual athlete? Second, how that affects individuals that view this athlete or other homosexuals. And third, on what is worse for the homosexual community as a whole. Let's look at the first issue, the first clash on is it voluntary or not? They said no, because the state is forcing you in this instance. We decided we would engage anyway with that, and we proved to you a sufficient benefit in our case in itself, right? We told you we told you that there's no definitive time in itself for a homosexual to come out to begin with. And when the state, if they do pressure you or force you to come out in this instance, we think it proves you a definitive time, and it shows you the state is backing you up in your decision to come out as a homosexual. But second, we told you the clear benefit that if it is voluntary and you do want to come out in this instance, right? We told you that we told you that it becomes a viewpoint for facing challenges, right? When an individual decides to come out because of all the discrimination, all the social backlash that they could possibly face, then it shows these homosexuals as an individual who's ready to face those challenges and is ready to come out. And it further solidifies the counter rhetoric that homosexuals are strong, something that they wanted to disprove, right? On this third idea, on the second issue, right, on how that affects individuals in this instance, right, they told us that there was no logical link in this, right, something that we disagree with, right. We told you in Ryan's speech how we clearly proved you a link, right. When someone sees their idol, their sporting idol coming out of the closet in this instance, right, we think that gives them, we think coming out of the closet in this instance, right, we think that we responded to that in two ways, right. We told you that first, we give them an amount, because there's an amount of social backlash in this instance, right. What happens to homosexuals who view this idol in this instance, right? That's when they're able to compare that. Okay, if they can go through this amount of social backlash, so can we in this instance. We think this is better for homosexuals to begin with. But we also told you when there are individuals who are heterosexual who view these homosexuals, then they're able to counter the previous conclusion about homosexuals to something that's more rational in this instance. When they're able to actually view these things and decide whether or not this idol who had previously principally aligned themselves with these individuals is still principally aligned with them. The homosexuals aren't all that different to begin with. And they came up and they told us their only harm on this, which is they will lose fans in this instance, right? First of all, we already told you there are differing mindsets within status quo, right? If you lose a sufficient amount of your fans, there are other individuals who respect you for being homosexual, who respect you for coming out at the beginning. We think you garner a whole new spectrum of fans in this instance, right? But we told you that secondly, even if that's true, we think we still break the narrative that homosexuals are weak in this instance. We still provide a benefit towards these athletes to begin with, right? What's this third issue? What is worse for the homosexual community to begin with? Under their side, they said it's contradicting the goals of the homosexual community and stuff like that, right? We don't think so, because what are the goals of the homosexual community, right? We think that they stand for you being able to be comfortable with you coming out, to be able to gain the same rights, equal rights as other individuals within status quo. We think it's only achieved under our paradigm. But then they told us that these individuals will be used for political gain and they will be manipulated in this instance, right? Something that Kim already counted in her speech, where she told you the homosexual community, if they do incentivize you to come out in this instance, has a liability to be a support structure in this instance. And it's extremely imperative that the homosexual community do this, because they are homosexuals as well. They are principally aligned with you in this instance. We think it's extremely imperative that happens. Then they told us that celebrities already exist under this instance, and that's extremely, and that celebrities already exist, and that already proves something, right? And they give you the example of Sam Smith, right? In this instance, then by saying that the Sam Smith was there, they say they're conceding to a benefit, Madam Chair. They're saying that there is a benefit when Sam Smith came out in this instance, right? And the only thing that they said was different was that he did it voluntarily, right? We think that yeah, he did it voluntarily. We think these athletes are doing it voluntarily as well, right? But this whole idea on the whole idea, right? On they said that look, if anything, people was So then they say there are celebrities enough in this instance, right? And then they told us that stereotypes exist, right? The homosexuals are weak in this instance. We think it's even more imperative then that a football player who has worked so hard for his achievements in this instance comes out to begin with, right? Because when you break the stereotype within status quo that homosexuals are weak, especially when you have a football player who's commonly recognized to be strong coming out in this instance, we think we solidify the idea that homosexuals are strong. We think we win today's debate.
Thank you.